Hello, my name is George, and today we're gonna look at some animations and how can you add one to your game object. For the sake of this video, let's say I have this square that I want to add animation to. And first of all, if you want to add animation to your object, you need a animator controller. Animator controller is basically interface that you can create by adding the first animation when you have your square or your character selected, and in the window animation you can dock animation window by window, animation, and animation. So you can add animator by creating the first animation in here. If I press create and I call some animation, let's say delete animation, and as you can see in the inspector, the object already gets an animator, and in the files there's also a animator controller which you can assign to your animator like this, and now your object has an animator which can be found in window, animation, animator. I have my animator here. You can also create animator by hand. So let's say I delete all the controller, all the animations, and I delete the animator from my character. I can also add animator by hand, writing add component animator, and also I can create in my file my own animator controller by create animator controller, and I can name it whatever I want, and in the same fashion as before I can assign my controller to the square character like this. So now we know how to create the interface for controlling our animations. And how do we create animations by themselves? To create animation on our square, we want to select our object, and in the animation window we can press create, and this will ask us what do we want to name our animation. I'm gonna name it rotation X. Now when I have the square selected, in the animation there you can see there is my animation that I created. For now it has no motion or no other sprites. I'm just gonna create basic 360 X rotation on the X-axis. I'm gonna press the recording mode, and if I change my position on the timeline to, let's say, here, and change the rotation of X to 360 and try to press play, we should see that our cube is rotating around the X-axis. There are two major types of animations. The one animation that we did, we've been pretty much just adjusting the rotation. We can be adjusting even the position. And the other type of animation is using sprites. I am using that technique for animation to my character. So as you can see, the idle animation consists of multiple sprites that each frame is rendered, and also if I'm running or sliding or jumping, everything is created by adding sprites as an animation. So let's say if I want to add an animation using sprites, I can do so by creating a new animation. I'm gonna call it delete later animation, and here I have multiple sprites that create an animation, and I'm gonna drag them to the delete later animation. And if I press preview and play, I can see that it's creating the animation, but it's super fast. So we can change that by setting the samples to the lower value. So let's say 12, enter, and now if I press play, we can see that it's nicely repeating the animation. Also, when we have our animator on our square and the rotation X, when I click on the rotation X in our Explorer, you can see there is a loop time checked. If I uncheck it and try to play the game, we should see the square rotating only once because it's not looping. If I press the loop time back and I press play again, it should be looping again and again. If we want to create more animations, we can do so by clicking on the drop down menu, and we can create a second animation. I'm gonna call this one rotation Z, and same as before, I'm gonna add rotation around the Z axis. So if I press play, the animation looks like this. So now I have two animations that I want to control in the controller for my square character, and I'm gonna control those animations in our animator. So if I select our square character, you can see there are now two states. Every animation in the controller is called state. It's a rotation X and a rotation Z. First animation you're gonna create is always gonna be connected to the entry point. So if I want to change that, I can right click the entry point and set state machine default state and change it to rotation Z. And if I go back to our scene and press play, we should be seeing the rotation around the Z axis. And if I go back and change it back to the rotation X, we should be seeing a rotation around the X axis. So that is working. If you accidentally delete one of your animation, let's say I accidentally delete it, or I select it and press delete, I can just drag my animation back to the animator controller, or I can create state, create empty, and when I select the empty state, I can then set the motion for the name of our animation. So I can choose rotation Z. So now I have my two states back. As you can see on the left to the animator, there are parameters. Those are basically some values that can control our transition between animations. We can create a parameter by clicking the plus sign and choosing which parameter we want. I can create a bool parameter and I'm gonna call it switch rotation. And now if I want to switch the rotation from the rotation X to rotation Z, I can right click on the rotation X, select make transition and add it to rotation Z. If I select the transition itself, you can see there are a lot of options on the right side. There is has exit time. That means that if it's checked to be true, the animation can always be changed after this percentage. So in this case it would be 71%. So if the animation is done at 71%, the frame after that, the exit time would be false and the next animation could take place. Also, there is a transition duration that you can see here. There's like a linear transition to the next state, which is the rotation Z. And if I make it a little bit smaller, let's say 0.1, you can see the transition gets smaller. And the fixed duration tells us if we're using seconds or if we're using percentage. So this would be 10%, this would be 10th of the second. Transition offset means if I select, let's say, 0.5, that if I transition from my first state to the second state would not start from the 0, but would start at the 50%. So I'm just gonna put 0 back there. Another thing that is important is conditions. If we don't have any condition, it will do the rotation X once and then switch to the rotation Z and keep doing rotation Z. So when I don't have any condition here and have my exit time checked, I should be having one rotation in the x-axis, and then it's gonna be transitioning to the rotation Z. So let's try that. As you can see, it did one rotation in one way, then it transitioned to the other rotation. If I want to access my animation via code, I can do that. So let's create a new script and call it animation on square. Let us add it to our square character. So now we have a script and an animator on our square. And if I open the script, I can access the animator by creating value animator, let's say anim. In awake method, I'm gonna cache our anim. I'm gonna say that our anim is getComponent in animator, and it's a method. So now we told us script that the animator is gonna be the animator that is on our character, so it's gonna be this controller. And let's say if I press something on the keyboard, I want to change one of the parameters. Since we created only one parameter in our animator, I'm gonna access that parameter by its name. So I'm gonna say anim.set, and it's a bool parameter, so I'm gonna say setBool, and it wants a name and true or false since it's a bool. So I'm gonna set it to true, and the name of our parameter is switch rotation, so we're gonna put it there. We only want to switch our parameter if we are pressing something. So let's say if input dot get key down, and let's say key code, I don't know, for example P, we are gonna be switching the value of our switch rotation to true. We need to add a condition between the rotation X and rotation Z. So let's add it in our condition list. So if our switch rotation parameter is true, we're gonna be switching to the rotation Z. So if I press play, the square should be rotating around the x-axis, and if I press P, which is gonna be now, it's gonna be changing to the other rotation. Let's say I want to flip from one rotation to the other by pressing the P. So I'm gonna add in our animator transition back to the rotation X, so create transition, and I'm gonna say that it's gonna be transition when our switch rotation is gonna be false. And in our code, since the parameter is always false in the beginning, I can say that always when I'm gonna be pressing the P key, I'm gonna be switching the switch rotation parameter to the opposite value. So I'm gonna call, instead of true, I'm gonna call anim.getBool, and same as before, I'm gonna say that the bool is named switch rotation, and I said that I want opposite value. So like this. If I press play, I can switch to the other rotation right now, And if I want to switch back, I can press it again now, and it's working. There is a slight delay between changing the rotations, so I can tell that it has no exit time on the way back and no exit time on the way there. So I'm pressing the P now, so it's changed super quickly, and pressing back now, it changed back super quickly. So that's gonna be all for me. I hope you enjoyed the video, maybe you learned something, maybe you not, so you can let me know by pressing the thumbs up or thumbs down below the video, or you can even press the subscribe so you don't miss any videos in the future. And I'm gonna see you next time. Bye!